In this video I'm going to take you through the custom storage solution that I came up with for the bikes and outdoor cushions that need to share the garage with the workshop space. The video is going to go through the design phase, how it was subsequently all built and put together, and then finally there's going to be some thoughts on how you might improve this if you were going to do a similar project for yourself. As I mentioned, the workshop that features in all my other videos shares its space with the storage I need for bikes and outdoor furniture cushions and other gardening tools. You can see the lawnmower in the corner there. And the problem is that got relegated to the back wall and it sort of blocks half of the doorway. And it's really not ideal for trying to work around these things, as well as the fact they just get covered in dust because I'm obviously sawing a lot of wood in here. So I had to come up with a design to cover the bikes and then also try and build in some storage cushions, which will come in the later part of the video. The way I've done this is to attach some battens on the wall, that's the green element of this, and then build a frame, which is the yellow part, around that. I'm then going to cover that with a plywood top, and that's going to create almost a workbench onto which I'll then build the cushions in the later stage. And then the final product looks like that. First thing to do then is to take off the hooks that previously hung the bikes so that I've got a clean wall to work on. And then I worked out how high I'd need the worktop to be to actually cover the bikes when built. I managed to pay someone to be my friend for the day, and they very helpfully held the batten against the wall.
Just check his level, is it level? Yeah. You checking?
Yeah, I'm checking.
Is it level?
I'm checking.
With that in place, we could pre-drill through with a small drill bit that just made a mark on the wall behind where we would need to go through again with the larger drill bit. Came back, did that, and then we could put the plugs in, which would eventually take the screws that hold the batten onto the wall. Hang on, because I've got to get the hammer.
We already checked it. Ooh.
The battens we're using are actually the side of an old bed that was donated to me, so the one for the side wall needs to be cut down to length. Just measured the length it needed to be, transferred that to the thing, and then to the batten, and then, is it a batten? I don't know what you call it. Is it? I don't know. Cut it down on the table saw anyway. Checked it was level, and once happy with that, we screwed it into the wall in the exact same way, and then we could move on to the next stage, which is building the frame that's going to eventually box in the bikes. I thought I might get away with doing this project purely with scraps that I had in the workshop, but I had to go to B&Q and buy some longer lengths just to do this sort of front face frame, unfortunately. But once we had those, we transferred the height that they needed to be from the battens on the wall to them, cut them to that length, and then here I'm just marking out some of the joinery, which in this case is going to be a half lap, that the face frame is going to be made out of. By marking the diagonals onto the end of the wood, I get what is the midpoint, and I can raise the table saw up to that height. And then if I do multiple passes, which I'll show here, I should eventually hog out all the material needed to create a half lap joint. I'll obviously do this to the reciprocating piece of wood as well, and then they'll just join together and be flush. To work out how wide the face frame needed to be, we could set a right angle against the back wall of the garage where it needed to be, and then measure from the batten we placed up to this. We can then cut down the piece of wood to that length and repeat the half lap joinery I just showed, and that creates the face frame that you can see just here. To attach the face frame to the back wall, we put this batten on. It needed a little corner notched out to fit on, but we attached it in the same way, so pre-drilled through it, then put the plugs in, and then you could stick it on that way. We could then use the right angle again to measure how far we needed the connecting piece to be to connect the face frame to the back wall. And with that measured, we could just cut that out and attach it, as you can see here.
What were these? I thought you were going to use these to drill it into the wall.
At this point, it's time to put the top on, and it turned out that I built it too big for the wood I bought, or I was too tight to buy a bigger sheet of wood. So what I ended up doing instead was to put some brace pieces across, which are attached with pocket screws. Could have showed this earlier for how I attached the face frame to the wall as well, but yeah, I used the little pocket hole jig to do that, and then once all attached, I could lay these sheets across and just fill any gaps with some offcuts as well. I had a slight overhang here, so I just scribed a line with a pencil along the length of that, and then I could take it over to the table saw and trim off the edges such that they were flush with the face frame. With them back in place, I could do the same thing for the overhang on the side of the, I don't know what you call it, cover shed thing that I'm building. Cut this one off with the jigsaw because it wasn't going to be safe to do with the table saw, but once done it all lined up really nicely, so quite happy with that result. Now, as I mentioned, the wood obviously didn't go all the way to the back, so what I did is to take some offcuts of plywood that I had that were slightly larger than that gap, I laid them on top, and then I climbed underneath and scribed the line that made up that thickness. You can sort of see the line there. Then all I had to do was trim that off. Again, I used the jigsaw, didn't need to be perfect, and with that done I could lay them on the back, and that created a final worktop. At that point, the structure of the bike storage is done, and it's time to resolve any dust issues that might arise. And my solution to this was to take an old bed sheet. I draped it just so that it touched the bottom of the floor, and then I temporarily pinned it in place so that I could cut it to length, which is what I'm just doing here. I wasn't sure at this point how I was actually going to attach the bedsheet to the face frame. I didn't want anything that was too permanent, so what I came up with was to put some wood inside of the bedsheet and then to pin wood on the other side, sort of to sandwich it in there and just hold it in place, rather than having to, I don't know, sew or stitch or staple or do anything too time consuming really, because I'm lazy. And then once I had that sort of rail built inside of it, I just pinned that rail to the face frame and it sat pretty nicely. And with the front done, I just did the exact same process for the side, and I finally added some magnets to the corners here because when the door opens this sheet was just blowing around, so I stuck some magnets to the corner and that just pins that in place so that it won't blow around when that door is opened. And then finally that's the structure done. I could load the bikes back in and then move on to part 2, which is going to be building the storage solution for the outdoor furniture cushions. Now the problem I've got with the cushions is that they're currently stored in the loft, as I am about to demonstrate here. Up. There's the cushions. Let's see how I go about getting them out. Okay, so they're packed in here, which is fine. And when I need to get them out, I either have to have someone down there, who I pass them to, or I have to drop them on a manky floor. There's sawdust all over this, so just doing some ladder thinking at the minute, so kind of need them to be somewhere down here, maybe on top of this. Where's my finger? On top of this somehow. There. And then I don't have to do this every time. It's pretty precarious. I'm trying to do this with one hand now, and I just seem to... Yep. So they're out. And they fit, kind of. Yeah, I don't know. We'll resolve that later, but for now, I've got to get the box down. As you can see, they fit perfectly, and it is completely sealed from all dust. I finally came to my senses and appreciated that that box was not an okay solution. So I came back to the drawing board and sketched up a basic frame in which the cushions can go. Again, just going to line that with plywood, and then the base cushions can go in the left and the back cushions can go in the right. The initial plan was that I was going to attach the plywood to the frame and then to the roof rafters just with pocket screws, but when I did put it in place it just didn't feel sturdy enough and the wood was already bowed, so I decided in the end to add another piece of wood as a supporting beam, which I'm going to pocket screw to the structure and to the roof rafters. So there I just scribed the line and I measured it, put that back into place, and it turned out I measured it a bit too small. It just fit a bit loose, as you can see there. So I cut another one, which is this piece, then put that into place and it fit a lot tighter, so that was alright. Checked it was square again, and then once I was happy I drew a line around where it was sat so I knew where to put it back after I drilled the pocket holes. Now that process of scribing the posts and then pocket holing them and then putting them back into place could just be repeated for the 3 other posts needed, and once that was done for each, I could take the plywood sides and I could cut them to the final length and notch out the corners that was needed to be done as well, so that it would sit flush against the back of the wall. I was going to stick these together with a nail gun, but I decided to go with screws in the end because I want this to all come apart in case, for whatever reason, it doesn't work with the layout or I need to change things in the future. I didn't show it for the first set, but to make sure that the back post aligned with the front one, I got a big carpenter's square and put it flush against the roof rafter, which I know is then flush to the front post, and that allows me to align the back post to that one. And here I lost my drill, but eventually I managed to screw this in. So as you'll have just seen, I notched out the corners for this piece as well, and then I could sit it flush against it, and I actually forgot to trim this one to length, so I had to come back and scribe a line, which I then transferred to it, cut it down on the table saw, and then by the time I actually brought this back over to put into place, it turned out that for whatever reason this post wasn't square, so the bottom of this piece was sticking out whereas the top was flush, and the top was where I scribed the line off of. So I was a bit confused, but anyway, I scribed a new line along this and then took it over and trimmed it down with a straight edge and the jigsaw because I had no way of doing this on the table saw at the angle it needed. That's the storage for the back cushions complete, the right hand side of this pillow storage unit thing that I'm building, and then I needed to do the bottom base cushions, and it turned out I actually had a bit of scrap wood that I haven't cut that at all. It was just perfectly the right height to fit and create the frame for the base cushions. So I put that on, did the same process, drilled through it with a small hole. That gave me the holes I could then come back with and drill with the bigger drill bit, put the plugs inside of there once that was drilled, and then I could attach that batten to the wall that way. I then got another piece of wood to use as the front top bit of the face frame of this part of the cushion storage, and once I figured out how to hold a spirit level, I marked that to length and then cut that down on the table saw as well. Now, I probably didn't do this in the best way, but to attach the top of this section, I put these corner brace pieces in and I checked that they were level to the front face frame that I just put on. And with those in place, I could get a piece of, I don't know what you call it, it's like scrap, it's not quite card, it's not quite wood. I don't know what this thing is, but anyway, I put that in there and then I scribed where all of the different cuts and notches needed to be, which I could then take over and transfer to the bit of plywood that I'm using for the top. So that worked out nicely, it all flushed the face frame and fit around the back notches nicely, but I forgot to take into account that alcove on the right hand side. So I attached this scrap bit of plywood to the underside, and then I measured how big that gap is, which I then transferred over to a final piece of scrap plywood and then cut that out with the jigsaw. Once I put that into place, that was the structure of this really done. So I could just load in the pillows, and I loaded in a load of other stuff that's going to sit on this shelf, a load of barbecue bits, etc. And that's the whole project complete. So you can see here, here's the final plan, and then that's how it ended up. Now there's going to be a follow-up video to this one where I'm going to put doors on these, try and seal up a bit of the dust a little bit better, and I might try and do something with that right hand side that you can see is empty, but for now that's this video. If you've got any questions about the process, just let me know, and I will try and do my best to help you, and probably won't be able to that much help because I'm not a very helpful person.